Hey everyone, welcome back. Are you ready for another reading lesson? Are you excited? Are you excited? Yay! Right? It's time for another reading lesson. No? Come on, get enthused with me. We got to put on our thinking cap, open up our ears, and be ready to work because it is time for lesson 15. Today, we are learning to identify causes and effects so we can have a better understanding of informational text. Because you might not know this, but cause and effect is a common text structure that you can find with informational text. That's the way authors organize information. Now, it's not going to be our exact text structure today, but there are still causes and effects that we can use to help understand our text. And we know we are successful when we can identify causes and effects in our text and explain events in the text based on those causes and effects. Whew, that's a mouthful. So let's move on to our foundational skills. We are still focusing on those words from French, and you have a fluency read today. So you are going to read The Little Houses of Laura Ingalls Wilder. And Laura Ingalls Wilder is a very well-known author. Some of the words that you are going to practice while reading are articles, cabin, courage, encouraged, frontier, magazines, memories, prairie, and rural. So you will learn more about Laura Ingalls Wilder in this fluency read. So make sure you take your time, do your best, and really focus on those words from French. So fun. For vocabulary today, we have the word mistrusted. And from the text, it says government officials frequently updated the people, but many Japanese citizens mistrusted these reports. They suspected that the radiation levels were actually much higher, and they worried about contamination of food supplies. They mistrusted the reports. And I have a little treat for you. We're going to watch a little small clip from Charlie Brown and an example of mistrust.
Charlie Brown, now Charlie Brown. I can't believe it. She must think I'm the most stupid person alive. Come on, Charlie Brown. I'll hold the ball and you kick it. Hold it? Ha! You'll pull it away and I'll land flat on my back and kill myself.
So he says, hold it! You're going to pull that ball away. Because that's what Lucy really liked to do a lot to Charlie Brown, is try and get him to kick the ball and then pull it away. So he has a mistrust of Lucy. So what could mistrust mean? And it's got that prefix miss on it, which you might remember means not. So the prefix mistrust means a feeling that someone is not honest and cannot be trusted. So in this case, Lucy cannot be trusted. And in our text, many Japanese citizens mistrusted the reports from the government. So we'll learn more about that today and why that is. So back to our text from A Tsunami Unfolds, we have fight or flight. So it says, people in shelters found ways to survive by building fires and locating supplies in nearby buildings. Thousands desperately searched for missing loved ones, posting notices in public spaces. Around the world, people were amazed by the patience of Japanese victims. They waited in long lines for food and other supplies. In Fukushima, officials reported more grim news. 2 of the reactors had experienced hydrogen explosions and partial meltdowns had occurred. The evacuation zone around Dachi was being expanded. Officials had begun screening people and pets with radiation detectors to check for radiation levels. And so, friends, if you didn't know, one way that we can get electricity is from nuclear power. And nuclear power, one danger of it is radiation. And radiation is basically something that you can't see it, but it travels and it can be very damaging to your health. And so in this case, when this power plant has had this issue, radiation is going out, and that is very dangerous for people and anything living. So it says government officials frequently updated the people, but many Japanese citizens mistrusted these reports. They suspected that the radiation levels were actually much higher, and they worried about the contamination of food supplies. A huge number of people fled the area. So again, radiation is very dangerous and you can't see it. And so people were really worried that the government was actually like lying to them. They mistrusted the reports, so they just left or fled the area. But on our Did You Know? Amazing rescues. 2 days after the disaster, a man in his 60s was found alive at sea, still clinging to the roof of his house. Wow, that is amazing. Because a family's house was completely flooded, but their dogs were found upstairs and still alive. Oh, goodness. I love dogs, so I'm glad that they were okay. And all 81 passengers aboard a boat were safely airlifted after being tossed around in a whirlpool from a tsunami. So those are good rescues. Yay. So what effects did the tsunami have on people's daily lives? Let's use some text evidence to think about this. So it said that on the last page, around the world, people were amazed by the patience of Japanese victims. They waited in long lines for food and other supplies. So that's an effect or something that happened because of that. They had to wait in line for food. So that affected their lives. They are also worried about that radiation. And it says that officials began scanning people and pets with radiation detectors. So that happened. They also lost their homes. They said that they were having to live places that were close to resources. And they're also worried about their food being contaminated as well. So it had a lot of effect on their daily lives. 1 month later, 1 month after the tsunami, people across Japan created memorials and stood in silence to remember the victims. Many threw flowers into the sea. Then it says, Japan still facing many challenges. By now, some people had to return to work and school, but most had not returned to their normal life. Thousands were still in temporary housing. So again, thinking about how this affected their lives, many were still in temporary housing. That means that their house was destroyed and they didn't have a home to go to anymore. The situation at the Daiichi remained a nuclear emergency. Radiation levels there were so high that workers were using robots to assess damage. The government had shut down Japan's 50 remaining nuclear plants for inspection. The earthquake and tsunami in Japan were the most recorded disasters in history. This means that scientists had a lot of new data to study, which could lead to valuable new lessons about earthquakes and tsunamis. Government officials were also studying the disasters. What had gone wrong on March 11, 2011? How could Japan, a well-prepared nation, avoid such a massive damage in the future? And it says, did you know? Illnesses from the tsunami. Many people developed health problems such as tsunami lung, a lung disease caused by exposure to contaminated water. Hypothermia was another common problem. People also worried that exposure to radiation would cause future illnesses. So again, not only have they had this major disaster with the earthquake and then the tsunami, but now they have the radiation, and some people got a lung disease and also hypothermia, which when you get too cold. A will to survive. Japan created new tsunami evacuation plans and taller sea walls. New sensors helped predict disasters more accurately and improve warning systems. The rebuilding of homes continued, but for many, its pace was slow and frustrating. So think, these are things that they had done to prevent a future disaster. It's 2 years later, 300,000 still in temporary housing. So 2 years after the disaster, 300,000 people still don't have a home. It says most Fukushima residents decided never to return to the contaminated area. When 2 nuclear reactors were restarted in Japan, thousands protested. Other countries began rethinking their use of nuclear power too. So imagine, the people know that these nuclear power plants caused them all this damage, and so when they started using them again, people were a little upset. Did you know? Damage from the March 11, 2011. The disaster killed about 19,000 people. Guys, that's a lot of people. The estimated cost of the damage was about $210 billion. That's billion with a B. That's a lot of money, y'all. For a long while, the people of Japan were in shock. Many doubted the government's ability to rebuild and protect Japan. But during the crisis, people helped one another and discovered that their own inner strength. That gave them the hope and strong will to survive. So then this little picture here says, hashtag Quake crowd gathered at sea today to remember. And then let's go back to Yumi's experience here. So again, we've been learning about Yumi in this book. So it says, Yumi remembers the terrible destruction of 2011, yet she also remembers something else, people's amazing responses. She saw no one trying to take advantage of others, even when his or her own survival was at stake. Instead, she witnessed people doing their best to support each other. It was this kind of support that helped Yumi heal and recover. So again, instead of people trying to get ahead, everyone was helping each other. So Yumi was saying that was something really good that she saw. But back to our learning intention for today. Remember, we were learning about cause and effect. So we want to be able to use identify causes and effects in the text, and then use that to describe events. So the event that we're going to describe today is that tsunami and how it had effects on the people that live in Japan. So it says, to explain science information from a text, readers often need to understand the causes and effects. So we're going to use our cause and effect graphic organizer. We used this graphic organizer back several stories ago, and we're going to use it again. So remember, the cause is the why that happened, and the effect is what happened. So when I look back in the text, it tells me in this bottom paragraph, in Fukushima, officials reported more grim news. 2 of the reactors had experienced hydrogen explosions and partial meltdowns had occurred. The evacuation around Daiichi was being expanded. Officials had begun scanning people and pets with radiation detectors to check their radiation levels. So I'm going to start with the why this time, and the rest of the times we'll start with the effect, the what. But here's the why. 2 reactors had partial meltdowns. Okay, so what happened because of that? Because of that, again, at the bottom of that, it says that officials had begun scanning people and pets with radiation detectors. So I'm going to fill that in as the effect. So if we go back the other way, you can think, what happened? Well, officials had to scan people with radiation detectors. Why did that happen? Why were they doing that? Well, it's because those 2 reactors had those partial meltdowns. We have to think cause. They had the partial meltdown. So what happened because of that? Officials had to scan people for radiation. So the next one, we're going to start with the what happened. Okay. So it says that the government officials frequently updated the people, but many Japanese citizens mistrusted these reports. They suspected the radiation levels were much higher, and they worried about contamination of food supplies. A huge number of people fled the area. So this time I'm going to think, well, many people fled the area, but why did that happen? Why did many people flee the area? So we're thinking about this event in the text. People are fleeing the area. Why did that happen? Let's go back in that paragraph again and check. Government officials frequently updated the people, but many Japanese citizens mistrusted the reports. They suspected that radiation levels were actually much higher, and they worried about contamination of food supplies. A huge number of people fled the area. So why did they flee? Well, because they mistrusted these reports about radiation. And as I told you earlier, radiation is very dangerous for your health. And then one more. So in this, a will to survive, and we're going to read the last paragraph again. So down here, it says, most Fukushima residents decided never to return to the contaminated area. When 2 nuclear reactors were restarted in Japan, thousands of people protested. Other countries began rethinking their use of nuclear power too. So again, what happened? People never returned to their homes in Fukushima. Okay, that's something they never did. So why didn't they go back? Well, let's see. Let's start at the beginning. Japan created a new tsunami evacuation plans and taller seawalls. Would that be a reason why people didn't come back? No, that's not it. New sensors helped predict disasters more accurately and improve warning systems. That's not a reason why they came back. That would be better. The rebuilding of homes continued, but for many, its pace was slow and frustrating. Okay, so things are slow and frustrating, okay? And then most Fukushima residents decided never to return to the area. When 2 nuclear reactors were restarted in Japan, thousands of people protested. Other countries began rethinking their use of nuclear power too. So let's think, why did people not come back? Well, it took so long for them to rebuild houses that they didn't even have a house to go back to for a long time. And then also, they didn't want to, it says they did not, never to return to the contaminated area because they're still worried about that radiation. So in my text this time, I put that the radiation levels were still high where people were concerned. They didn't want to come back. So that's how we can use cause and effect to explain the events in our text. So again, to explain that science information, we have to understand causes and effects. Based on the causes and effects we described, we can see that the tsunami was a major disaster that impacted many people, right? People didn't come back. Even the pets were affected where they could have been exposed to radiation as well. So lots of things were happened because of the tsunami. So again, back to our learning intentions. We were learning to identify causes and effects so we can have a better understanding of our informational texts. We know we are successful when we can identify causes and effects in the text. And we did that in our graphic organizer. We identified 3 causes and 3 effects. So check. And then explain events in the text based on those causes and effects. And we did that as well, explaining that tsunami and events that happened after that based on cause and effect. Check. So for you guys, for your learning or for your reading response, you have a question. What changes have the Japanese people made to prevent another disaster? And you need to write your answer in the effect box. So I'm going to tell you why they made those changes. Well, there was a devastating tsunami that hit Fukushima, Japan. So what happened because of that? So what changes did they make to prevent another disaster? All right, and you can reread the page to find out. But I hope you have a wonderful day. Do all of your work, be kind to one another, and I will see you guys in the next lesson.